Welcome to XRP Pro Ledger, and today we need to address something directly before we get into the data, because the most persistent misconception circulating in the retail XRP community right now is the market cap argument. The belief that a high XRP price is somehow a problem, that institutional adoption requires the token to stay cheap, that massive market capitalization is a barrier to the use case. That argument is mathematically inverted, and the institutional data from the last 8 days proves exactly why. Over 370.2 million XRP has been removed from centralized exchanges and locked into private non-exchange cold custody, permanently removed from the retail trading float. OTC desks in London and Singapore are quoting XRP at a 22.4% premium above the public exchange price. Total US spot XRP ETF AUM has reached $1.92 billion. And the Ripple-affiliated corporate jet has just departed New York, heading directly to Washington, D.C.'s Dulles Airport for what internal sources describe as a final CFTC briefing on the digital commodity certification rollout. Stay with this analysis until the end, because the DTCC's tokenized equity math produces a structural price floor of $6.85. And the bridge currency logic that Wall Street is operating from right now explains precisely why institutions need the price to go up, not down. The market cap argument requires direct demolition before any other analysis can be properly understood, because it is the primary psychological barrier preventing retail investors from accurately reading the institutional accumulation signal that the on-chain data is producing. The market cap argument runs as follows. If XRP reaches $500 or $1,000 per token, the total market capitalization becomes so large that institutional adoption becomes impossible. The argument sounds logical on the surface. It is structurally wrong. The error lies in a fundamental misunderstanding of how bridge currency settlement actually functions in institutional finance. When a bank uses XRP to settle a $100 million cross-border transaction, it does not need to hold $100 million worth of XRP as a static reserve. It needs to hold enough XRP to bridge the transaction at the moment of settlement, and the quantity required is inversely proportional to the price. At $1.50 per XRP, a $100 million settlement requires approximately 66.7 million tokens. At $500 per XRP, the same settlement requires only 200,000 tokens. The institutional efficiency of the bridge function increases as the price increases. Banks need the price to go up because a higher price means they need to hold less inventory to guarantee the same settlement capacity. The retail psychological environment operating against this data is producing the exact behavioral pattern that institutional accumulation programs are designed to exploit. Retail investors are watching a price chart that has been trading in a narrow range and concluding that nothing is happening. The 22.4% OTC premium tells a completely different story. When OTC desks in two of the world's most significant financial centers, London and Singapore, are quoting XRP at 22.4% above the public exchange price, the signal is unambiguous. The public exchange price is not the price at which institutional demand is being satisfied. It is the price at which retail supply is available to the market. Institutional demand has completely detached from the public order book because the public order book no longer contains the volume that institutional buyers require. The 22.4% premium is the cost of sourcing supply outside the retail exchange infrastructure, and institutions are paying it, which means their calculation of XRP's forward value makes even 22% above today's price a rational purchase. The $6.85 DTCC structural floor calculation introduces the most institutionally credible price floor figure that Wall Street desks have produced in this cycle, and it emerges from a specific and verifiable institutional modeling exercise tied to the DTCC's own tokenization documentation. Following the DTCC's tokenized equity proof of concept reports, institutional quantitative desks have modeled the liquidity requirements for a functioning tokenized equity market on the XRPL. The specific calculation addresses a conservative scenario, XRP supporting just 2% of the DTCC's daily clearing volume. 2%, not full migration, not majority capture. 2% of the volume that the DTCC currently processes through its traditional clearing infrastructure. At that 2% threshold, the structural price floor required to prevent system-level liquidity fractures, the point below which settlement transactions begin generating slippage that degrades the cost advantage over traditional clearing, is $6.85. This is the institutional floor, not the ceiling, and it is derived from 2% of the DTCC's volume, not the full tokenization scenario. The 370.2 million XRP removed from centralized exchanges over 8 days represents the largest sustained supply drain this market has documented in a single continuous window. The specific routing of that supply, from Upbit and Binance, the two exchanges with the highest retail participation rates in their respective markets, into private non-exchange cold custody is not coincidental. The routing tells the story of where the supply is coming from and where it is going. It is coming from the exchanges where retail sellers are most active. It is going to cold custody infrastructure that does not interact with the public market. The tokens transferred to non-exchange cold custody are not available for retail purchase at any price. They are not sitting in an order book waiting to be sold back. They are in institutional vault infrastructure, removed from the float for the duration of the custody commitment, which in the context of DTCC clearing collateral is measured in years, not weeks. 8 days of that drainage at 370.2 million tokens represents a supply compression rate that the current ETF inflow data compounds rather than offsets. The ETF limit buy wall concentration between $1.38 and $1.42 provides the demand-side structural confirmation that the institutional accumulation program has established a defined price floor below which buying pressure becomes concentrated enough to prevent downward movement. Pre-market data from New York trading desks shows a massive concentration of institutional limit buy orders for spot XRP ETFs, sitting tightly within that 4-cent range. This is not retail bidding behavior. Retail limit orders are distributed across a wide price range, reflecting diverse entry thesis assumptions. Institutional limit orders concentrated in a 4-cent band reflect a coordinated valuation consensus. Multiple institutional buyers have independently calculated that any price below $1.42 represents a purchasing opportunity that their mandates require them to act on. The $1.92 billion in total US spot XRP ETF AUM is the cumulative result of that coordinated institutional buying discipline operating over the preceding weeks. The limit wall is not speculative positioning. It is a structural support mechanism constructed by institutional capital. The bridge currency efficiency argument that opens this analysis is confirmed operationally by the OTC premium data in a way that most retail observers have not connected. If the market cap argument were correct, if a high XRP price were a problem for institutional settlement efficiency, the OTC premium would not exist. Institutions paying 22.4% above the public price to secure large blocks of XRP are not paying that premium because they believe XRP is overpriced relative to its utility. They're paying it because they have run the bridge currency efficiency calculation and determined that XRP at 22% above today's price is still dramatically cheaper than the alternative, routing the same transaction volume through correspondent banking infrastructure at 2.1% per transaction in fees and delays. The OTC premium is not a sign of irrational exuberance. It is a sign that institutional buyers have compared XRP's all-in settlement cost, including the 22% premium, against Swift's all-in settlement cost, and the XRPL is still the cheaper option by a substantial margin. The Ripple corporate jet's departure from New York to Washington, D.C.'s Dulles Airport is the operational signal that this analysis has been building toward, because it places Ripple's executive team inside the CFTC briefing room at the precise moment when the digital commodity certification rollout is entering its final phase. The CFTC is the regulatory body whose approval is required to formalize XRP's digital commodity classification under the Clarity Act framework. A final briefing at the CFTC regarding the digital commodity certification rollout is not a routine regulatory interaction. It is the final step before regulatory determination that converts the institutional positioning occurring through OTC desks, ETF structures, and cold custody transfers into a legally formalized compliance framework. The entities that have been building their XRP positions ahead of this determination, the ones paying 22.4% OTC premiums to secure supply before the certification is announced, have timed their accumulation to complete before the regulatory event that makes further accumulation at current prices structurally impossible. The convergence of the bridge currency logic, the $6.85 DTCC floor, the 22.4% OTC premium, the 370.2 million token supply blackout, the $1.92 billion ETF AUM, the limit buy wall at $1.38 to $1.42, and the Ripple jet heading to the CFTC represents a dataset whose individual components are all pointing in the same direction simultaneously. That simultaneity is not coincidental. It is the signature of a coordinated institutional deployment sequence reaching multiple visible milestones at the same time, because the underlying preparation that each milestone required has been executing in parallel. The retail investor watching a flat price chart while this sequence is executing is experiencing the information asymmetry that institutional capital relies on. The institutions paying 22% above market have access to the bridge currency efficiency calculation, the DTCC floor model, the Clarity Act timeline, and the CFTC briefing schedule. The retail seller has access to the public price chart. The gap between those two information sets is the gap between $1.40 and $6.85. The complete picture assembled tonight requires no further elaboration. 370 million XRP has been removed from exchange supply in 8 days. OTC desks are paying 22.4% above market to source the remaining supply. The DTCC floor model produces $6.85 as the structural minimum for 2% of its clearing volume. The ETF limit buy wall has established $1.38 to $1.42 as the institutional support floor. Total ETF AUM has reached $1.92 billion. And the Ripple jet is on its way to the CFTC for the final digital commodity certification briefing. The market cap argument that retail investors are using to justify selling is mathematically inverted. Banks need the price to go up because settlement efficiency scales directly with token price. The retail investor who sells at $1.40 today is selling to the institutional buyer who has calculated that $1.40 plus a 22% OTC premium is still dramatically below the $6.85 structural floor that the DTCC's own tokenization math demands. If this analysis changed how you're thinking about XRP, hit like and subscribe. I drop deep dive breakdowns like this twice a day to keep you ahead of the market.